Welcome back to another edition of Force Friday, where we talk about Star Wars theories, characters, concepts, comparisons, analyzations, collectibles, and more. And today we're going to continue with our wish list series regarding the Black Series. Now, once again, when I say Black Series, I really just mean 1/12 scale. That could mean Mafex, that could mean SH Figuarts, that could mean Bandai model kits, within reason, of course. But I would prefer it be either Black Series or SH Figuarts at this point. And the idea is to come back and look at this in a year's time or so and see what updating needs to be done and adjust the list appropriately from that point forward. Another thing is I've really been looking forward to getting into the original trilogy and then the sequel trilogy because they've done so many characters from those movies. So you can start to kind of get into the nitty gritty, the background characters, the C-string characters, etc. So I'm looking forward to the next 6 of these. And we'll start with number 10. And my number 10 is the Tonica Sisters. Now, this is for a number of reasons, and I have a video coming eventually on them and why we haven't seen any merchandise about them. But the Tonica Sisters have a history both in canon and in legends. They're the two ladies at the cantina, commonly called another nasty little name that we won't mention, but definitely grabbed my attention as a young lad. And the fact that we never got a 3 3/4 representation of these figures ever has always made me really want a set. They were, and I believe this is in Legends, but they were twins and became con artists, and their names were Bria and Seni, I believe, but they often pretended to be just one person in order to kind of pull off their scams. Cool characters, sexy characters, mysterious characters, and kind of the grail for Star Wars collectors as they've never had a representation. Which brings us to numero nueve, which I'm putting at Biggs Darklighter. Should be a relatively easy character to get done with all of the X-Wing suits that have already been sculpted. Luke's childhood friend, pseudo big brother that he always looked up to and wanted to follow his lead, who he reunited with in the Battle of Yavin to take down the Death Star, and was the main character in most of the deleted scenes, and really helped, in my opinion, kind of establish Luke's sort of routine life on the quest for something bigger. There's a part of me that would like to see those scenes added in. Who knows if that's ever going to happen. But what could happen is a representation of this character in the 6-inch line. And now we'll move on to number 8, which on my list is the character I like to call the Snitch. Now, this, I'm not sure how to pronounce his name. He's a Kubaz. Garandan, I think is his name. He's the guy who points out to the stormtroopers where the droids were they were looking for and who was making the commotion inside the cantina. I have a special bond to this character because in 2005, I believe, I went to San Diego Comic-Con and my sister-in-law made a shirt for me with his face on it that said "Stop Snitching." And I was stopped by Rosario Dawson, who it sounds like is playing Ahsoka in the upcoming Mandalore Season 2, invited me back to her table because she loved my shirt so much, ended up hanging out a bit and all that. Great memory, but now that character is always tied to it, and therefore I'd love to have a representation of him. Number 7, all good girls go to heaven. And hopefully this choice won't be battling heart disease and end up in the same place. And that's Mr. Porkins, a character who has become beloved and in many ways has become a fan favorite and very endearing, mainly I think because of his name and his name's contrast to his physical stature. When you start fleshing out your troops for the Alliance, when you deal with Episode 4, many of them are going to be pilots. And Porkins, I think, has a special place in most of our hearts as fans, and I'd like to add him to my Yavin shelf amongst his fellow pilots. Now, number 6, some people might say I'm cheating, and I get it. But I feel like with what's been going on recently, how we've been getting a 2-pack here and there, for instance, the 3PO in Chewbacca, and then the deluxe sets like the Gamorrean Guard and what have you, that perhaps 2-packs aren't outside the realm of possibility. Now, we've already mentioned the Tonica Sisters, and you might have thought I would stop there, but I'm not. My number 6 choice is Ponda Baba, and of course, the good Dr. Cornelius, who have probably one of the most iconic scenes in all of Star Wars in the cantina when it is made clear that he doesn't like you, which has always seemed like pretty crazy. Can you imagine like you're just in a bar and some guy pulls up like, "Hey, heads up, I don't like you, man. I'm not feeling your vibe." That's kind of what this dude did. And as a result, the first time you get to see a lightsaber in action, it also leads to arguably the goriest scene in all of Star Wars, ironically, but definitely an iconic scene and definitely 2 iconic characters that not only scratch scratch this itch, but you could also put on the city of Jeddah in your Rogue One setup. And that brings us to the halfway point at number 5. And I got to give it to my guy, Boshek, who I prefer to call Broshek. And I call him Broshek because his hair is super slick and he's single-handedly responsible for saving the universe and never gets the love, credit, or admiration for it because he's the guy that introduces Obi-Wan Kenobi to Han Solo's co-pilot Chewbacca, thus putting the wheels in motion to take down the Death Star and begin the rebellious rise of overthrowing the Empire, which couldn't have been done without my guy Broshek. Side note, there's a documentary about him, I think available on Netflix, but I can't seem to find it anywhere. And I've searched the internet, I feel like from top to bottom, and can't find any trace of it. But I either am going crazy and imagined I watched a documentary on it, or it's disappeared and there's no trace of it, which seems harder to believe, I guess. But I have a very vivid memory of watching it. But who knows? Stranger things have happened, especially to me. Nonetheless, in my mind's eye, that kind of tracks the history of the actor because he never was credited for the role, and they track him down and meet his family and all that. It's very touching and very interesting piece of Star Wars and cinema history. Which brings us to the back half. Numero 4, Admiralmati. What good is having a Darth Vader in a Star Wars collection represented on your shelf if you can't have him going around choking the living out of his employees? And what better employee to choke the life force out of than the cynical non-believer Admiralmati? Your sorceress ways don't, everybody wanted to choke that guy. And I mean both in universe and out. And I bet you he had it coming for a very long time. I have no sympathy for this dude, but I do like the character and would love to have him thrown up on my Death Star shelf. He's a little weasel. Number 3, the big Dodonna, the gentleman who leads the attack against the Death Star in the Battle of Yavin, moving the chess pieces accordingly to try to take down the Death Star. There's a lot of characters like him in the original trilogy that we don't have representations of in a 6-inch line, and he's arguably the most important of those type of characters in the original film. He was a legendary military officer who served with the Navy of the Galactic Republic during the Clone Wars and later as a general in the rebellion against the Galactic Empire. He was the commander of the Misasai Group, one of the largest cells in Senator Bail Organa's rebel network, and he's the one that formulated the plan that led to the successful Battle of Yavin. So a pretty key and pivotal character to have, and one that we really need, in my opinion. Moving on to number 2. Oh, you guys are going to call me a cheater. But it's another 2-pack, and it's because what good is one without the other? And that's Aunt Beru and Uncle Owen. And I want these characters for episode 2 as well, but they're really needed for episode 4 to sort of flesh out your Tatooine cast. And they're the characters that kind of grounded Luke into his position. Very key, very pivotal. We don't have any representations of them throughout the saga, with the exception of the 3 3/4. Now, I suppose if you wanted to make a shortcut and be cheap and cut your way around it, you could buy a couple Mythic Legion skeletons and paint them black and throw them on the ground, but who wants Aunt Beru and Uncle Owen laying like a skeleton corpse on the ground? It's frightening and mean-spirited. So let's keep them alive, but let's get them made. Which brings us to our number 1 choice, and knowing me, it should come as no surprise, and that's Princess Leia in her Yavin ceremony dress. It's one of my favorite outfits of her. I always think she looks absolutely stunning in it, and I would like for her to have that smile. I know smiles are hard to sculpt and stuff, and I get it, but with all those stoic faces, I always think of her smiling in that particular dress. We already have Luke in his ceremony outfit, so it'd be nice to get her in hers. Han's is pretty much the same, except he buttons up, which is wild, but his isn't as needed as hers. I'll take any representation of that character that I can get, and I'd like to have every representation of that character on my shelf, and therefore, she's coming in at numero 1. Plus, she's a super popular character, and therefore will probably sell extremely well, so it'd probably be a no-brainer for Hasbro to get her done. Of course, there's tons of other characters I'd like to have done from this movie, but we're just on round 1, and hopefully next year we'll be in a different spot with a whole new wave. But more than likely, we're just going to be swapping out a few here and there. Unfortunately, I tell you what, going through this, not for nothing, it was interesting to me of just how many characters they have knocked out in a relatively small amount of time. And I mean vehicles, creatures, characters, different representations of those characters within that film. They really have made a conscious effort to sort of flesh out the main cast. My question for this is, since they have fleshed out most of the main cast, how much of these obscure characters will they revisit, and how often will we get just newer releases of older representations of these characters? How many X-Wing Lukes will I have to buy in order to get hammerhead guy from the bar? I think that's a very scary question to face in regards to this collection, because it seems like the obscure characters are representing 1 to 2 figures a wave, and that's only if they don't plan on packing those waves with troopers or some sort of other army builder like Sand People and Jawas. But hopefully I'm overreacting. Hope you guys are staying safe. Hope you guys are staying sane. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Until next time, take care.